Hello and welcome to this video. Miles Davis was born in 1926. That's a significant year really for births. Our recently departed Queen of England was also born in 1926. Margaret Thatcher was also born in 1926, and so was Miles Davis and John Coltrane. It's an interesting year because the people born in 1926 weren't quite old enough to participate in the war. A lot of the musicians that created bebop in New York in America were doing so while many of their musician compatriots were actually away fighting in the war. A record ban meant that those musicians didn't get to record, but by the end of the war, we suddenly have unveiled to us this incredible world of bebop. Miles Davis, as I said, enters the war aged in 1941, 16, 15. By the time it finishes in 1945, he is 19 years old. And by 1946, he finds himself at the age of 20, not only at Juilliard Music College, but also right in the middle of the bebop scene. Straight away, Miles Davis is picked by Charlie Parker. This is a testament to Miles Davis's talents, that he is pulled in straight away to the centre of music making in the world at that time. For John Coltrane, the same age as Miles Davis, it's not the same story at all. He's in New York, he's around these guys, but he's not quite making the waves they are. But he's lucky enough to be playing alto sax in the Dizzy Gillespie Big Band. But Coltrane, unlike Charlie Parker, unlike Miles Davis, is a slow burner. Now, one of the guys that really creates bebop was Thelonious Monk. Now, Thelonious Monk was born in 1920. So obviously in 1940-41, he was 21 years old enough to participate in the jams at Minton's alongside musicians like Charlie Christian and Kenny Clarke. The jams that basically created the blueprint for bebop. Bebop was not created by Dizzy Gillespie or Charlie Parker. What they did was to come in and create the stylistic approach and phrasing for bebop. And in doing that, Charlie Parker became the sort of Louis Armstrong of the next generation. Charlie Parker, like Thelonious Monk, was born in 1920. There's only 6 years difference between them. But Coltrane, in the late 1940s, is not really setting the world alight. He's a slow burner. He practices and he slowly starts to build his way up. Now, of course, all of these musicians, apart from Thelonious Monk, were heroin addicts. In the early 1950s, Miles Davis was working as a pimp and he was a heroin addict, and it was affecting his music. But when he moved from, what label was it? Was he with Prestige? But when he moved from a smaller label up to Columbia in the mid-50s, he then really starts to reshape music. But of course, he'd done this earlier on in the late 40s with his Birth of the Cool sessions, but those sessions had not come out by the mid-50s. Miles really came to, sort of national fame or worldwide fame by playing tunes that the public loved, things like, Someday My Prince Will Come, which is from Snow White, but he would play it in a mournful and intense existential way. He provided the direction for musicians to escape, the tyranny of bebop, which was a tyranny. You had to be able to really play fast. You had to be able to get through those chord changes, had to do a whole bunch of things to be able to play bebop. And it was a tester. It sorted the men out from the boys, but by the same token, it was a straitjacket for a truly creative musician. Thelonious Monk, Charlie Parker, Miles Davis, John Coltrane are all on their own trajectory. Thelonious Monk, the guy's a genius, but he's a misunderstood genius. The music industry knows he's a genius, but the general public don't. He signs to Blue Note. He makes an album and they could name it The Genius of Thelonious Monk, but he doesn't quite catch on with the public. He's doing something else. He may have started playing bebop, but now he's created his own very angular, angular style with where his playing is so linked into his compositions. After Duke Ellington, Thelonious Monk becomes the most important jazz music writer, composer in history. His compositions are like little riddles. They're like little jewels, like a Fabergé egg, but they're an angular and strange Fabergé egg. They echo Thelonious Monk's quite strange personality. He's quiet and withdrawn. He is obtuse. He won't play the game. He sat one day in a car with Bud Powell, who was a heroin addict, and they get busted, and he decides to take the blame. And he then gets banned from performing. It really affects his career. So although we have Miles Davis really, making a splash on the music scene right back in the mid to late 40s with Charlie Parker, Miles has gone down and now he's come back up. Coltrane is slowly, steadily working up. And Thelonious Monk is trying his hardest but getting nowhere. In 1955, Charlie Parker dies. His stomach ruptures while laughing at some jugglers on the television, and he's gone. Suddenly, this architect, this leading light, has gone. And at this point, ironically, Thelonious Monk, Coltrane, and Miles Davis all ascend, or they reascend. And it's interesting to look at this. Now, Coltrane was ascending by joining Miles's group. Miles has worked with the best saxophone players of the era. He'd had Sonny Rollins in his band, he'd had Jackie McLean in his band, but now he got Coltrane, and Coltrane was pushing forward. He wasn't just a sideman playing alto sax in Dizzy Gillespie's big band. Now he was playing tenor sax, and he was taking the basic building block of jazz, the 2-5-1, and he was expanding and pushing it out into 3 dimensions. But the thing with Coltrane, what was holding him back, is he also, at this point, was a heroin addict. He was also addicted to sweets. He would take heroin and sweets. The sweets rotted his teeth. It affected his embouchure. His weight swelled up and down, right? I don't think he was a tearaway, but he did seem to really be out of it. And Miles, who had now cleaned up his act in the mid-50s and got a major label deal, decided to get rid of Coltrane. Coltrane famously goes back to his home, walks in, said hello to his wife, walks upstairs and locks himself in his bedroom, and he kicks heroin. But he also has a spiritual awakening. And he emerges as this as almost like a completely different musician. This like 3 or 4 dimensional approach to playing jazz, where he's taking the very building blocks of bebop, the 2-5-1 progression, he has bust open. He is now ready to bust that open, right? In a few years' time on Giant Steps, he will bust that open, and once it's busted open, he will then pursue firstly a modal path through music, and then a free path through music. His trajectory is going to go through the very building blocks of bebop all the way to absolute freedom. That is going to take him around about 20 years. And the main work is going to start in 1957. In 10 years, Coltrane is going to completely affect the trajectory and, how else could I put it? The trajectory and importance of the best of 20th century music. 1957 is a key year for Coltrane. He emerges like a butterfly into the world. But there's no gig with Miles, is there? Thelonious Monk has also signed a major label deal. He's brought out his album Brilliant Corners. Or is it Different Corners? Every time I do a video, I get those 2 mixed up. Anyway, he suddenly starts to emerge. He starts to get some profile. People are starting to see what an incredible musician he is. He might not play fast like Bud Powell or Oscar Peterson. He might not create beautiful vistas like Bill Evans or Ahmad Jamal. He's really seems to be pulling on a tradition that goes back to African music, almost playing the piano like an African instrument. Now, it seems that Coltrane, with his hyper-technical, hyper-fast, going in all directions approach, wouldn't seem to gel with this stripped-down, minimal, angular, one note meets 1,000 approach of Thelonious Monk. But in 1957, they hook up. And I feel it's this hooking up of Coltrane that helps accelerate him into the future to create the musician he is. Now, why is that? Well, I think it's to do with the fact that Thelonious Monk has a very specific approach to playing music, and his compositions require a certain approach, and it's not the approach Coltrane has got. He has to enter in that world, and he has to find a way of utilizing his sheets of sound approach within Monk's music, which he does incredibly. Suddenly, Coltrane emerges. Coltrane emerges with Thelonious Monk. Thelonious Monk then makes one of the greatest jazz albums, an album that I have put in my essential jazz albums over and over again, which is the Coltrane and Monk album. Once he's back on his feet, once he is showing the world what he can do, this exposure drags him back into Miles's band. He goes in there and makes the biggest selling album in the world, Kind of Blue. And then from there, he creates his classic quartet with McCoy Tyner, the other one, Elvin Jones, and Jimmy Garrison. Come on, Andy, you can keep up. And then goes on to make some of the great jazz albums of the 1960s, including A Love Supreme, which is a sort of spiritual free jazz album, which has sold over 1 million copies. This is an incredible achievement. It's testament to what great music can achieve. Now, in 1957, whilst in that band, Coltrane and Monk turned up at Carnegie Hall, and they did a gig. And this gig was recorded on the 29th of November by the Voice of America and gets stuck in an archive. More recently, an album was released. It was released on Blue Note Records, and I'm looking at it right now. I've got it here in my hand, this album here. Now, I can't tell you how much I love the Monk and Coltrane album. I didn't think that could ever be bettered. I was aware of this album, the Thelonious Monk Quartet with John Coltrane at Carnegie Hall. I thought it was some weird bootleg thing. I thought they were, capitalizing on two massive names in jazz, and Blue Note had made this reissue. But because I love it so much, I went and checked it out the other day, and I've had it in the car now. This is one of the greatest jazz albums ever made, right? That's the bottom line. That's what I'm here to tell you. And I've given you a big setup, and I'm trying to show you that it's so important, this album is, because it captures Coltrane with Thelonious Monk. But this time, rather than being in the studio making an album, they are caught and they don't think anybody's listening except the Voice of America. No one is trying to make an album. This album is called together from two shows. There was an early show where they played Monk's Mood, Evidence, Creep School with Nelly, Nutty and Epistrophe. And then there is a hotter late show where they do Bayard, Sweet and Lovely, Blue Monk and Epistrophe. And the recording seems to have run out on Epistrophe. The lineup, of course, is Thelonious Monk on piano, John Coltrane on tenor saxophone, and then we've got Ahmed Abdul Malik on bass, and a favourite of Thelonious Monk back in the 50s, Shadow Wilson. Why is this so great? What is Thelonious Monk doing on this, and what is Coltrane doing on this album? Why has this just blown me away, right? Well, first off, Voice of America recorded this. I expected it to be sort of okay-ish, quality-wise. It's pristine. Thelonious Monk's piano just sparkles, and it feels like you're there with them. They feel like no one's listening except for the audience. They're just going to play, and they're having fun in playing. Coltrane is within this riddle that Thelonious Monk has set. His tone, this mournful tone he's got, which I believe Charlie Rouse had a similar tone, who became sort of Thelonious Monk's go-to saxophone player. His tone suits these melodies so well. Thelonious Monk on this album is having a lot of fun. He's at the peak of his powers. Thelonious Monk was an incredibly creative person, but that creativity came with a price. And as the 1960s carried on, his sort of mental well-being descended to the point where by the 1970s, he wasn't really performing, and he died in 1982. I will discuss this later at the end of the video. But here in 1957, he's at the peak of his powers. Coltrane has just emerged. He's at the peak of his powers. These tunes are interesting because Thelonious Monk can sometimes explore these areas that we can only describe as obscure blues. They're blues. They've got 3 chords, but there's all this weird stuff going on and weird hits and all this type of stuff. Or you get these little sort of miniature puzzles where the melody will go round and go through descending bass lines, the chords will come in, there will be like little hits and stops that you have to get. Often the key to Thelonious Monk is the melody, you know. And so we think of Straight No Chaser as a blues, but really it's and that's like, let's take this one phrase. It's like a riddle. How can we play that phrase? How does it respond through the blues? And when you're improvising over them, you are as much improvising on that melody as you are on the chord changes. Bebop had pioneered this idea that you got to make the changes. You've got rhythm changes, you're playing through rhythm changes, you've got to make those changes. You're playing Cherokee, you've got to make the changes. Most jazz musicians are trapped in this. It's as though the beboppers trapped them there so real musicians could then go off and make proper music. That's what I feel happened, because they're obsessed, everyone's obsessed with the changes. But improvising's not about changes, it's about melodies. It's about melodies, and this is what Thelonious Monk plays. Everything is perfectly placed. Everything is weighted. He drops little bombs. He does little runs. It's incredible, but Coltrane's not playing like that. Coltrane's taking the chords that Thelonious Monk, and he's applying his system to it. It's fascinating to hear Coltrane applying his system to these chords. And you feel he goes inside of the tune and he just bursts it out. Some of the playing by Coltrane here is the most virtuoso you're going to hear. By the time we get to the end of the 50s, Coltrane's going somewhere else. But here he is. He's like 30 years old. He's practiced and practiced. He's clean. His mouth feels great. He's lost weight. And he is just burning. That's what you get, is Coltrane burning on this. And he's burning through these chord changes, and he takes them and he just takes them from inside and explodes them out. Whereas Thelonious Monk starts from the outside and just reduces them down in. And the tension between those two players, you can see they both love it. They both love it. Now, the rhythm section do something that I think Thelonious Monk pioneered, and it's something that's got forgotten in jazz. They just swing. They swing so hard. The drummer does not get involved in the energy, you know, the sort of tidal wave of Coltrane's playing. He just sits in the background. Shadow Wilson just sits there swinging like that. You feel like he's got a big smile on his face. Same with the bass player. And against that, when you get to those Monk, there's one tune on here that I wasn't that aware of. I think it's called Evidence. And it literally is a load, it's a beautiful swinging tight rhythm section. But then the melody is just these explosions. They're rhythmical, but they're placed in the most awkward places you could actually be in. Ah, 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 ah. It's like this, it's punctuated. Coltrane's incredibly cutting tone. You know, Coltrane played with the heaviest reeds he could get. Rico number 5, I believe, and his sound just cuts. Great jazz musicians, their sound cuts. This is the biggest gift, I believe, of black music in the 20th century, is creating these tones and sounds that cuts. All the greats, that's what pulls them all together, whether it's Louis Armstrong or it's T-Bone Walker, or it's Billie Holiday. The tone cuts. Thelonious Monk takes the piano and he plays it like a drum. He cuts through. Coltrane takes his relatively new instrument, the tenor saxophone, and he hits it so hard, and he gets a mournful, sad sound, but it also cuts. It's like a knife, and it cuts through the music. This album is very, very good. Thelonious Monk starts off, opens up playing a cadenza. He's playing a cadenza around Monk's Mood. The band doesn't come in for a while. Within that, you can hear that he's doing his standard Monk stuff. But every now and then he will do what sounds like an Art Tatum run, one of those arpeggiated speed from top to bottom. He goes from the bottom to the piano to the top. They're executed perfectly. You feel with Thelonious Monk that this is one of the great 20th century pianists, and he has a virtuosity that all the other ones have, but he has decided to explore something else in jazz. And what he does is he explores his own world. You know, we know when someone's playing like Thelonious Monk, it's not West Coast jazz, it's not smooth jazz, it's not hard bop, it's not bebop, it's not free jazz. It's Thelonious Monk, and that's what we've got, and Coltrane enters into that world fully. Now, as the 1960s carried on, Coltrane went on to greater and better things until in 1967, 10 years after this album was made, he gets cut down by liver cancer. Suddenly, Coltrane's gone. It's a massive hole in music. When I was a kid and I first read about John Coltrane, it was in the Observer Book of Jazz. It was a tiny little red book that I had, and I was reading through all the different musicians. And then there was a picture of Coltrane, and I looked at the picture of his face, and I read about him, and I thought, my God, this is a musician. This is a heavyweight. I could tell just what the story that was coming off the page, that he'd done this, he'd worked with that, he'd worked with Miles, he'd done all this. I never heard him. And then I realized that my dad had an album in my collection, in his collection, sorry, which is now in my collection, that had a Coltrane track on it. It was called Giant Steps. So reading this book, I went out and put Giant Steps on. You know, I was a heavy metal kid back then. I like fast playing, I like complex stuff, I like stuff that did my head in, you know. And suddenly this tirade came in. Now, I know that tirade inside out. I've studied Giant Steps for the last 20, 30 years of my life. But at that moment, I was like, whoa, what is this? I read down and then found out that he died the year before I was born. He was gone. There was no chance that you could like read up about him. What did he do? Is he still on tour? Could I go and see him? Who is this bloke? No, he's gone, and he's been gone the whole length of my life. He's been gone. You know, people who saw Coltrane are rare. They're few and far between. Has anybody watching this video ever seen Coltrane? If you did, get in touch. I want to interview you. This is an incredible thing to have even just been in the same room of him, breathing the same air and the same air that he was affected with his incredible playing. Coltrane's a slow build. You know, his nickname of Train is a brilliant metaphor, like Bird was a brilliant metaphor for Charlie Parker. He just worked slowly up, slowly and steady, practice, practice, practice. And he kept forging forward. And in the end, he left the confines of jazz. He left the confines of the chord progression. But he hasn't quite done that here. And yet, if you listen to his saxophone playing and you were to isolate the rest of the band, it's the same thing he's doing on Interstellar Space, you know, 10 years later. It's incredible. Thelonious Monk, it's as equally a sad story. In the early 70s, he was put together on a tour with Art Blakey. He wouldn't talk to anybody in the band. He had no interaction with them, which was strange because he was friends with Art Blakey and had worked with Art Blakey for many years. At the end of the tour, when someone asked him, why didn't you ever speak? Why didn't you chat to Art? He answered, I didn't want to talk to him because he was so ugly. That story for me really sums up the sort of almost childlike mind of Thelonious Monk. He spent most of the 70s sat in his little house, not going out. He died in 1982. Coltrane died in 67. Charlie Parker was already gone. The guy that came through was the guy that was there right at the beginning with Charlie Parker, Miles. Miles had the qualities of a pop star almost, or a rock star. And rock stars aren't like normal musicians. I see them like big game hunters. They can take it. They can be pushed to the extreme and they'll take it. And that's precisely what Miles did. He still died at the not advanced age of, I think, 65 in 1991. Yes, 26, 65 years old. Quite incredible. Charlie Parker, 34. John Coltrane, 42. Thelonious Monk, 62. Miles Davis, 65. And here I am, 2025, still being blown away by these musicians. This, for me, is the highest level of music. This is why I do this channel. It's great to talk about progressive rock. It's great to talk about the jazz fusion musicians. But when I put an album like this, I feel that this is the greatest music of all time, especially this album. Hearing these guys improvise and hearing what they're doing instrumentally, it's never been bettered. This video is going to be a series of videos where I talk about classic jazz albums. And this is going to be the first on the list. And it won't be the obvious ones. I have had a lot of views doing the most essential jazz albums or the greatest jazz albums of all time. I want to go back to it, but I want to do it in reality. And like I've said, what I'm doing at the moment is I'm only talking about albums in my collection. I'm only talking about an album that I can hold in my hand or put in my car or put on the turntable here and sit and listen to properly. Not something that I've just got and assessed on Spotify. It's no way to listen to jazz. You need it like this. This is a great release, really great. We've got a little booklet here, as you would have. There is a lot of writing. I haven't read any of this, to be honest. I don't know what I've said, how it responds to Ira Gittler and all these greats. Ashley Kahn writing about what happened here. I have given you my take on it. I had this in the car just now. I was driving up to my studio to collect something and I thought I'm going to talk about this right now. I love this music. I haven't done any research for this video. I've basically been inspired by what I just heard in the car and I want to capture that. I want to be able to hold these albums in my hand. I want to come and relay the experience to you. This music's difficult. I know that. I know that some people might hear me going on like this and then they might go and put this album on and go, well, I don't quite get it. I don't get it. What's Andy on about? I mean, it's nice jazz, but what's so special about this? And I'm going to be honest, there's other jazz albums that I like more. What is so special about this? And if I'm really honest with you, I don't know. I don't know. I can hazard a guess. Why is this album so great? It's because jazz is the music of the moment. And it's fundamentally a story told by great people, great personalities. It has nothing to do with technique or chops. It's instrumental music. It's not dealing with storylines. It's dealing with visceral emotions. But these emotions can become more and more sophisticated. The sound of a great blues guitarist just burning you away with the emotion that's in blues, that feeling that makes you want to close your eyes. That's an emotion that we know really well. But this little tiny world of Thelonious Monk, I don't know. I don't know what it is. And I don't know why it's so great when Coltrane's in there. They have something to say. I think they're trying to make the world a better place. They had a belief. I think most jazz musicians had a belief back then that they were trying to make the world a better place. They were trying to make it beautiful. They were trying to describe something in sound which we wouldn't even be able to point at anymore. Music's changed so much. Back then, music was created in the moment. And in the moment, music had suddenly become the most important music. It had created the recording industry. By the 1950s, before rock and roll came along, these musicians were playing at Carnegie Hall. The jazz musicians had taken this sort of street music form, the music of marches, the music of drunkenness, debauchery, jumping around, fun, you know. They'd taken it and they'd taken it to a point where it was seen as being the highest music on the planet and it would deserve to be performed at Carnegie Hall. And these musicians, Coltrane and Thelonious Monk, were seen to be at that level and they were brought in and celebrated. Record labels supported them. This was a little idyll in 20th century popular music before the companies started to go, really, do we really care about the art? Or so we just go for the commerce. Let's go for the commerce. And now all we have left is commerce. We don't even have music left. Music doesn't actually make any money. It's the idea of making money that makes money now. That is where we've ended up. And so to have a glimpse into truly great music making is very esoteric. It's when you see a master at work like this, you have to meet them halfway and it's hard. We all have to meet them halfway. If I put an Earth, Wind and Fire album on in the car and I could just drive around bopping my head to the best funk ever made, I may even enjoy that more than this. But I feel that I am having to uplift myself just to even meet this music halfway. That's how great this is. Thelonious Monk Quartet with John Coltrane at Carnegie Hall. This is one of the great jazz albums and the first in my series called Essential Jazz Albums. Thank you for watching this video. If you like the jazz, I never know it's going to get the views or not. And really, should I care? Did they care about getting the views? Monk and Coltrane, did they really care? But I do, so because I'm not them. I'm a lower form. I exist in a stratosphere a little bit down, I think. But I'm trying to move up. I'm trying my best to uplift myself. I'm trying my best to put my hands up and look upwards and say, please help me to ascend. And I'm trying to help all of you to ascend to a better place. I don't know what that better place is, and I don't know where it comes from or where it will go to, but that is what this is all about. That's what music shows us, surely. So if you believe in that, like this video, stick a subscribe on it, maybe become a patron, support me in what I'm doing here in any way you can. You can become a member of this channel. You can become a paid member. I have a PayPal tip jar. You can put some money in that if you would like. Whatever you feel like to try and support me so I can come in and try and explain this to you guys. That's my job now. That is my job here now, is to try and hold these albums in my hand, feel the love that I feel for this music and the life it's given me, and try and describe that to you. Those of you who know it will love it. Those of you who don't know it will be intrigued. That's what's really important. That's what I'm doing. So if you enjoy this, I thank you for enjoying it. If you didn't, other YouTubers are available.